1773 at Derby Landing in a house a stone's throw away from the Housatonic River on Commerce Street. He was the third of 7 children born to Lieutenant Joseph Hull, a Revolutionary War officer, and his wife, Sarah Bennett Hull. He was baptized by the Reverend Daniel Humphreys, father of General David Humphreys. His father, Joseph Hull, was a lieutenant of artillery in the Revolutionary War and greatly distinguished himself in the defense of Fort Washington, where he was captured and spent 2 years as a prisoner aboard the infamous British prison ship Jersey. He was exchanged in 1778 and re-entered the Army and was given command of a flotilla on Long Island Sound, consisting of several whaleboats. Following the war, he engaged life in the West India trade and later in whale fishing. In 1784, at 11 years old, young Isaac was sent to Newton, Massachusetts to live with his uncle, Revolutionary War hero William Hull, and attend school. But like most boys who I imagine at that time grew up around the sea, he resisted schooling and only wanted to go back to the sea. At 14, he joined his father aboard the sloop Hawk for voyages to the West Indies transporting lumber, salt meats, dry goods, farm animals, and later molasses or sugar. No doubt young Isaac would have been put to work caring for the animals in addition to everyday chores on the ship. Isaac spent much of his early career traveling between New England and the West Indies. At age 20, he was placed in command of a ship that was twice taken captive by French and British privateers. Routine events that would become one of the many sparks to ignite the War of 1812 between the United States and Great Britain. On his 25th birthday in 1798, he joined the newly formed U.S. Navy and was commissioned a 4th lieutenant aboard the frigate Constitution, due in part to his well-connected uncle, William Hull. He served on that vessel for 2 years, first under Commodore Samuel Nicholson, and then under Commodore Silas Talbot. The Constitution was one of 3 44-gun war frigates in the United States Navy. Designed by Joshua Humphreys, she represented the cutting edge in sailing and combat technology. Launched from Boston in 1797, consisted of live oak, red cedar, and hard pine. She was 204 feet long with a beam of 43 feet, and she weighed 2,200 tons. The copper sheath under her hull was crafted by Paul Revere. She carried 44 cannons with ranges up to 1,200 yards and a crew of 450 sailors. 72 sails covered 3 masts, and her main mast rose 233 feet. Her speed could reach up to 12 knots in a good wind, and she was painted black and white and cost us over $300,000. She is forever immortalized as Old Ironside, dubbed so under the command of Isaac Hull. Hull distinguished himself on the Constitution, eventually becoming 1st lieutenant and 2nd in command of the ship in 1799. While cruising off Santo Domingo, Captain Talbot ascertained that a valuable French ship was about to leave Puerto Plata, Santo Domingo. And feared he would not be able to capture her if she once got to sea, he sent Lieutenant Hull to cut her out. Taking the sloop Sally, Hull successfully boarded the ship and within a few minutes secured her. He was promoted to Master Commandant in May 1804 and commander of the brig Argus. And he participated with Commodore Edward Preble's Mediterranean Squadron in the war against the Barbary States, and he was made captain in 1806. The following year, Gilbert Stuart, one of the most famous portrait painters, was commissioned to paint Hull. The War of 1812 was one of the least remembered conflicts in the United States history. Lasting over 2 years, the war between the United States and Great Britain ended in a stalemate. It was fought over an enormous area from Canada to the Great Lakes, to the mouth of the Mississippi, and along thousands of miles of Atlantic and Gulf coastline. At the time, the war was referred to as the Second War for Independence, and it was here that one of the greatest naval battles took place, and Commodore Isaac Hull was dubbed a national hero. In June 1812, Hull assumed command of the Constitution after stopping in Annapolis for supplies. He then took the Constitution down the Chesapeake Bay and turned north to travel up the East Coast. On July 16th, the Constitution's lookout spotted several sails on the horizon. By 5 the next morning, 5 British warships were closing in on the Constitution. Hull knew it would be suicide to fight all 5, so his best strategy was to outsail them. So began what has been one of the greatest naval chases in history. Hull ordered portholes in his rear cabin knocked out and widened and had 2 24-pound cannons placed in the opening. He ordered an 18-pounder placed in the Constitution's spar deck as the stern chaser and another pointed off the forecastle. Then the wind died and the Constitution was dead in the water, with the enemy less than 12 miles away. Hull ordered his cutters, or small boats, lowered, lines attached, and his men rowed with all their might, pulling the Constitution forward. The British followed suit, but with more cutters. They quickly gained on the Constitution. Hull then ordered his men to start kedging, a method frequently used on the Housatonic River and one that Hull knew well. Sailors rowed a 700-pound kedge, or anchor, far in front of the ship. The sailors turned the ship's capstan to haul the ship towards the anchor. Another cutter repeated this maneuver with a second 400-pound kedge. With the British closing in, the Constitution fired from her stern. The British ship backed off and concentrated on their rowers on 2 ships. The HMS Belvidera was within fire distance and her bow cannon blazed. The American crew shouted defiantly as shots fell from the Constitution's stern. The Constitution's rear cannon answered and a cannonball smashed into Belvidera's main deck. The HMS Guerriere opened fire, but her shots fell short of the Constitution. For 2 days and nights, the chase ground on, suspended only when a slight wind came up. Hull ordered buckets of water hoisted to wet the sails, making them more sensitive to any breeze. As the breeze died again, cutters were once again sent out to pull the Constitution forward, and the exhausting chase continued. Hull ordered 10 tons of fresh drinking water pumped out to lighten the load of the ship. The gap between the Americans and the British widened. Hull stayed at his command post on deck during the entire grueling chase. And at dawn on July 19th, the Constitution had opened up a 2-mile lead. An hour later, the wind came up and the Constitution sped off. The Guerriere and the Aeolus attempted to cut her off, but the Constitution's speed and Hull's superior seamanship prevailed. The chase continued into the afternoon when the British gave up. Hull and his crew had outsailed a numerically superior British squadron in the 57-hour demonstration of leadership, endurance, seamanship, unparalleled in naval history. The Constitution sailed into Boston, where there had been rumors of her sinking. Hull and his crew and his ship were hailed as national heroes. Fearing blockade, Captain Hull anchored long enough to restock supplies and was back at sea on August 2nd. Over the next 2 weeks, Hull captured 3 British cargo ships and kept a lookout for the Guerriere, whose captain, James de Craig, had publicly bragged his ship would quickly send any American frigate to the bottom of the sea. At 2 in the afternoon on August 19th, off the coast of Nova Scotia, the Constitution's lookout spotted their enemy. Captain de Craig reportedly told his crew, there is a Yankee frigate in 45 minutes, she's certainly ours. Take her in 15 and I promise you 4 months' pay. As the Constitution closed on the Guerriere, de Craig fired broadside after broadside, but Hull held his fire. British cannonballs struck the Constitution but bounced harmlessly off her live oak and copper sheathing. A crewman is said to have shouted, "Hooray, her sides are made of iron," and Old Ironsides was born. With the ships now only 25 yards apart, Ducre tried to pull away when he realized that his ship was vulnerable. According to several accounts, Hull gave the command and double shots exploded from every muzzle and raked the Guerriere at close range with devastating effects. The Constitution fired again and again. Then Hull demonstrated his superior seamanship by crossing the Guerriere's bow, pouring fire from his gun. Several accounts reported that short, stocky Hull split his seat right up his breeches amidst all the battle action. Another broadside raked the ship and toppled her mast. Hull reportedly ignored his split-open pants and shouted above the roar, "Huzzah, my boys, we've made a brig of her." The destroyed Mason mast slowed the British as the Constitution attempted to cross her bow again. The ships entangled. Constitution poured another broadside into Guerriere's bow, and Guerriere's guns set Hull's cabin on fire. Trumpeters on both ships called for boarding parties. Marine marksmen on both ships added deadly sniper fire to the fight. The Constitution broke loose and prepared to rake the Guerriere again, and the wounded Ducre signaled for a surrender. The next day, Hull blew up the sinking ship and sailed to Boston to report his victory and land his prisoners. Details of their victory were reported in newspapers. The entire nation went wild with adulation for Isaac Hull, his crew, and the remarkable ship forever to be known as Old Ironsides. Congress gave him a gold medal and ordered $50,000 to be distributed to his officers and crew. Back home, people showered him with gifts. The tea service was a gift from the citizens of Charleston, South Carolina. The urn was from the city of Philadelphia. Ironically, both of those were made in England. His Navy career lasted 40 years, over 40 years, which during that time he served on the Board of Navy Commissioners, ran the Boston Navy Yard, the Washington Navy Yard, and commanded the U.S. squadron operating along South America's Pacific coast. He retired in 1841 and settled in Philadelphia with his wife, Anna Hart. Isaac Hull died in Philadelphia on February 13, 1843, and is also buried there. Over the next 200 years, Hull would be immortalized. During the Civil War, the Union Navy acquired a ferry boat and outfitted it as a gunboat and named it the U.S.S. Commodore Hull. It was assigned to the Union blockade to block the Confederate States of America. Subsequently, 4 more boats, all destroyers, were named with Hull, the last being taken out of sea in 1983. This memorial tablet was dedicated on the Constitution on July 1st, 1932, as a present from the citizens of Derby and Shelton. It reads, Captain Isaac Hull, United States Navy, born in Derby, Connecticut, March 9, 1773, died in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, February 13, 1843. As a lieutenant upon the U.S. frigate Constitution in the French Naval War of 1798 to 1901, and as captain of the Constitution at the beginning of the conflict with Great Britain in 1812, he brought glory to his own name and honor to the country. The victory of the Constitution under Hull's command over the Guerriere at a most critical point in our nation's history cheered and strengthened the hearts of American people and made possible the continuation of the Second War for Independence. This memorial is erected by the citizens of 2 towns where Hull spent the days of his boyhood and youth, Derby and Shelton, Connecticut. A model for the U.S.S. Constitution was represented during the inaugural parade for FDR in 1936. In Derby, the house where he was born was torn down 50 years ago this year, but a plaque affixed to the front of a brick building at 38 Commerce Street, owned by P&C Associates, a packing company, proclaims the site's historical significance. A plaque was placed by the Derby Historical Society in 1962 during a ceremony that you can see in the photo, bottom right. The plaque reads, "Upon this site once stood the Hull homestead, birthplace of Commodore Isaac Hull, captain of the U.S. frigate Constitution Old Ironsides. In the War of 1812, when on August 19, 1812, the Constitution destroyed the British frigate Guerriere, pride of the British Navy. It was a victory that encouraged the American people to prosecute the Second War with Great Britain to a successful conclusion." Commodore Isaac Hull was born on this site March 9, 1773. His name is imperishable in American naval records and history. This plaque placed here by the Derby Historical Society in 1962. This year will also mark the 11th year for the Commodore Isaac Hull road race. The race begins in Shelton, where Hull owned a house on Riverdale Avenue in Shelton. The Valley United Way honors its big donors with membership in its Commodore Hull Society. In the David Humphrey's house at the Derby Historical Society is displayed a model of the Constitution, photographs of his house in the area, and a pair of his uniform pants, not the ones that were split during that battle. The bridge carrying Route 8 over the Housatonic River is also named after him. A copper plaque that was read earlier alongside the bridge is one of the many that was stolen throughout the valley over the past year. A granite stone will be replacing the plaque and will be installed over the next week. I'd like to close my portion with a letter from Representative Rosa DeLauro, who could not attend today. Dear friends, thank you for the kind invitation to join you as we celebrate the unveiling of the War of 1812 U.S.S. Constitution stamp. The first in this commemorative series, this stamp has a special connection to our community and the ship's commander, Commodore Isaac Hull. I am pleased to have this opportunity to join the Derby community in celebrating this special piece of our rich local history. Though the War of 1812 is often called the forgotten conflict, it can be said that it was this confrontation that really defined our nation and forged our national identity. It was during the War of 1812 that the United States Naval Forces, in which the U.S.S. Constitution and Commodore Hull played an important role, proved a worthy opponent to those of Great Britain. It was under Commodore Hull's command that the U.S.S. Constitution acquired the name Old Ironsides during a victorious battle with Guerriere in August of 1812, just 2 months into the war. The Battle of Baltimore brought the inspiration for our national anthem, and as the United States successfully defended its sovereignty, a renewed sense of American independence spurred our nation to become the greatest in the world. It is important that we, as a nation and a community, celebrate our history and never take for granted the freedoms and liberties that serve as the core of our nation's character and spirit. I want to extend my thanks to the United States Postal Service for choosing to celebrate the bicentennial of the War of 1812 in such a special way. It is my hope that with each new stamp in the series, we will not only serve as a reminder of our rich history, but also as a source of inspiration to a new generation. Again, thank you for inviting me to join you this morning. Please accept my best wishes as you mark this very special occasion. With warmest regards, Rosa DeLauro.